Welcome back to the True Geordie YouTube channel, and Liam Payne, the former One Direction member, as I'm sure you're all aware, has died. This is one of the most shocking deaths in a long time, because even though this is a 31-year-old grown man, he is forever crystallized in all of our minds as this young pop star with all of his mates singing happy songs. To see that something so dark has been the way at the end of his life is fucking mind-blowing. He was at this hotel in Argentina, apparently catching up with his old band member Niall, who was performing in Argentina at the time. He'd previously been spending time with a girlfriend in the country who'd recently departed, and he was, as far as I'm aware, according to reports, alone in the hotel. Now, at some point in the last 24 hours, the hotel staff had felt the need to report a man for being aggressive, and they were saying, we need cops, we need an ambulance, because this guy is out of control. We think he's drunk on drugs and we can't handle this situation. And I think by the time that people arrived to deal with it, Liam Payne had fallen or had thrown himself off of that hotel and had died. Now, it is possible that he could have fallen from the balcony. Okay, that has happened before, right? We've seen that in some cases. But he was smashing the hotel room up. He was clearly in a bad way mentally, and that is kind of leaning towards this was a deliberate act in his part. In the heat of the moment, he's felt the need to do this. We don't know why yet, but there are some breadcrumbs in the way his life was going leading up to that may explain this. Now, I didn't know the guy. I did actually meet him once through a poker game online. We ended up at the same poker table, and you kind of had like a video call screen. So it was just me and this kid from One Direction talking to each other for about 10 minutes. And I have to say, you know, some of these kids, they've been in the weirdest of circumstances, being forced into the spotlight from a very young age, and they can't even communicate properly, some people, right? But this lad actually seemed fairly normal, got on with me really well, was very polite, very kind. Does that mean he's a great guy? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But that was a moment in time where I'm talking to a very famous kid who'd been famous for a long, long time in his life. And yet he held it together like a normal dude. And I thought, you know what? You seem all right, you. Now, I don't know this kid properly, obviously, but I do know the dark side of fame and how cruel it can be. And that's on a minor level, at my level. God knows what he's been through. And I am familiar with suicide. I've experienced that before. And I know what, a domino effect usually that takes place before that event happens. Some people think that people just wake up one day and they just feel like it. It's very much not like that. Usually it's a sequence of events that is a disaster, one after the other, and that leaves that person wanting out. And if this is a suicide, as it looks, well, then it's very bloody sad, isn't it? And being that famous is fucking brutal. You're just something to be used by the vast majority of people. Even Simon Cowell did an interview a while back about the band, and he said, like, one of his biggest regrets is not owning the name of One Direction and giving that to them. And you're like, well, it's their band, like, it's all about use. Even when this kid's dead body is lying on the floor, TMZ, releasing photographs of his arm online, even when he's already dead, he's just something to be used, right? And if you think that his individual reactions and personal relationships weren't similar and transactional, you're wrong. Even at a low level in fame, you become a commodity to people. You think your friendships are real, you think a lot of things are real. You never ever know. And honestly, I genuinely think that the best form of success in life is those rich bastards who nobody knows about. They are the luckiest, because I think fame is poison. And if it wasn't for this being, my passion and my work and what I want to do, even the fraction of it that I've experienced, I wouldn't be on any social media. So I can quite imagine how anyone in the public eye, as we've seen many, many times before, could spiral. And in life, the dream scenario for all of us is to sort of start at a trajectory of down here and life gets better as it goes along. And that's the best way to experience life. For example, you're a poor bastard when you're young, you get rich, life gets good, you get the girl, and that's how life goes. Now, the problem with being a child star specifically is you're not mentally mature enough to deal with what the machine is putting you through. But also, a very hard thing to deal with for a lot of people is the trajectory. Because what we imagine fame to be like is you get famous early on, you get successful, and it just stays and stays and stays, and you keep getting more successful, and you get more and more money, and life gets better and better and better and better and better. That is not how it happens. Especially when you take off like a fucking rocket, like One Direction did. And in One Direction, he was one of the main guys, right? He was one of the main singers, and at the start especially, he was viewed because I think he was viewed as the lead singer very, very early on. He made a comment about that he was later ridiculed for, and he went through a lot of ridicule, and we'll get onto that. But when you're the main guy in the main boy band and the most successful boy band of a generation, and you're so young and life takes off like a rocket, there is no way that young man could have ever foreseen what was coming, the drawbacks, the downside, the fall off. And when the band, eventually split up and you're not the one who has the most successful career, and you've got Zayn and Harry, whose career has taken off like a rocket, and you're sort of sitting there watching, and then you become that figure of ridicule and criticism, and the one people are digging out more than any other. Must be hard, because a lot of people would look at that and go, well, yeah, you're so successful still though, so what are you complaining for? And it's like, but when you've been at such a high, and then you come back down, the drop, it can be overwhelming for some people. We've seen like Love Island contestants commit suicide before when the fame has teetered off and no one gives a shit about them anymore. Now, this isn't quite the same as that. People still care, but he wasn't where he wanted to be in life. That's quite obvious. You can tell that by the drug use that he was clearly doing in the hotel at the time and the state he was in. But I think we all could see that just from the interviews he was giving in the years leading up to this even. There was a sadness about this lad. I don't think I'm some sort of psychologist for pointing that out. I think a lot of people could see that. And we all knew he was the one who got more stick than any other lads. I knew that, and I don't even follow this band. And also, his relationships with women were clearly not going well. Like, he struggled to maintain one. And I think, to be honest, from what I've seen of him, I think he wasn't very mature. I think when you have so much success at a young age, you don't have to go through the same struggles as ordinary people do. You struggle to evolve. And I think, when he got with Cheryl, who was like 10 years older than him, which is obviously very unusual that, normally it's the man that's older, and then he has a kid with her, and it didn't look like he really grew into that father role. From all the reports I'm reading, she was basically the main parent and he wasn't really hands-on like that. There was times he had to go to rehab and just completely bounce from the kid's life. And some people just really struggle with growth and evolving, especially when life isn't going the way they thought it was going to go. And you're in mental pain, you're not really the drug-taking type, someone offers you something, you get a bit of ease from it, before you know it, you're dependent on it. Before you know it, you're leveling up and you're going harder and harder and worse drugs. It's very easy for that to happen, especially when you naturally talk to yourself like shit up here, and then the whole of Twitter and the whole of, social media is also piling in on you constantly. You don't like yourself, no one else likes you. I got a numbness. Totally understandable. And he did this interview a while back explaining those struggles that he was going through.
But there's times where that level of loneliness and people getting into you every day, like I say, just every so often you're like, when will they send? And then that's almost nearly killed me a couple of times.
As in, you wanted to?
Yeah, when I've been in a bad place, 100%. There's no point denying it. It's definitely been on the menu a couple of times in my life, and
this is enough. I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, 100%, man. I was very lucky to have really great people. Just really great people around you, and just finding out a different way of looking at it. Like you say, when things start to pile on top of each other, that's when it can really get you. You've really got to change your view about it. There's only one thing you control within that situation, it's you.
Was that your coping mechanism? Just get on with it?
Just get on with it, yeah. Just do today and get on with that bit, and then there'll be another hurdle in a few months or a few weeks, or, maybe even the next day.
And he says there, get on with it. Getting on with it isn't addressing it. Even his attitude then is one of a young man who hasn't really been taught the ways to cope. And like, who the fuck is taught really properly? I've been through multiple things where I'm like, what the fuck am I going through here? How on earth am I supposed to cope with all of this at one go? You're not really given a manual, especially if you're in the public eye. We're supposed to be hunter-gatherers, yeah, and then all of a sudden you've got millions of eyeballs all judging and speculating on you. It's just not what the human mind is designed to tolerate. This little clip here is a good example of the silly level of scrutiny that this lad was subjected to when his girlfriend here is trying on a dress, and he made a comment along the lines of, well, finally she's covered up, because she's usually wearing much more revealing things. Now, who gives a rat's ass that he said that? Well, apparently the whole world, because he got loads of backlash for it, calling him a misogynist. Now, misogyny is when you hate all women. A lot of people throw that word around, have no fucking clue what it means. When you say little things like that, which any man in the world could say that to his missus flippantly and not even think anything of it. It's just, an off-the-cuff comment. And now all of a sudden, He hates all women. He's a misogynist. Like, it's insane what this lad was subjected to over the number of years he was in the spotlight. You can't make little mistakes because they get blown out of proportion beyond belief. And I'm not saying he was a great guy or anything like that. I'm just saying the circumstances of his life were not easy. Now, after Liam and Cheryl's relationship ended, kind of predictably, given their age gap and whatever, it just never looked right. And I think most people were thinking the same thing, to be honest with you. He ended up with a girl who did look a lot more like what you would have expected for Liam, which was Maya Henry, who was a model, you know, younger than him, and the dynamic just seemed more natural. Now, he proposed to her, so you know she was the one. In his mind, a man like him with all that value, all that money, all that success, you don't just hand that over unless you're serious about a girl. This is the one in his eyes and the love of his life. But unfortunately, that relationship also broke down. Now, in recent weeks, or even days, she's been doing interviews promoting a new book, which is going to dish the dirt on Liam Payne. And we already know this guy gets criticised for just even commenting on the outfit his current girlfriend is wearing, let alone the dirt that this girl was about to reveal, an allegedly abusive relationship that she was in with him. And she was contacted by a friend of his to say, please don't put this book out. He isn't in a good way. Now, apparently, she's changed it so that it's a half fictional book. Like, she's 8 Mile it, basically, so that she can have creative freedom to say whatever the fuck she wants and no one can really challenge it, because she hasn't said it's Liam Payne. He's called Oliver in this book. And in the book, apparently, there's emotional abuse, drug abuse, and violent episodes. Now, what violence level we're talking about, I don't know. She also discovers that she is pregnant and becomes excited about it. However, his reaction is drastically different as he threatens to leave her if she keeps the baby. Naturally, even though she's talking about Oliver, the whole world is going to read this and hate Liam Payne for it. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve, you know, any repercussions or blame in the event that he was alive for this. We just have to understand where his head was at around his death. This is catastrophic for a man with so much to lose. And for her, does she have anything to lose? We didn't know who the fuck she was before this. Let's be real here. She's just another model. So she had a lot to gain by coming out and dishing the dirt on this guy. And it's funny because in this article, they talk about the controversy around their relationship and how it's amplified by their public profiles. This man has 27 million Instagram followers alone. She has, what, 600,000? He was one of the most famous people in the world. She can go anywhere and people wouldn't have a fucking clue who she was, unless you're a super fan of him or whatever. He is the source of your fame. That's after dating him, by the way. She had 600,000. So, like, that's like with all the ancillary followers that you're going to gain from being around him. So she's done some videos on her own social media to help promote this book. And she even did a podcast only 2 days ago, which sparked headlines about Liam Payne. Whether or not what she's saying is true or false or whatever, the timing of this leading up to his death cannot be ignored.
She needs to keep his name out of her mouth. She's obsessed, blah, blah, blah. They broke up years ago. Well, I made a 5-second TikTok about something he talked about on a podcast. He was the one airing out everyone's dirty laundry on a podcast. So it's okay for him to talk at the minute I make a 5-second video. It's over, right? Also, you're calling me obsessed. Oh, she's crazy. This happened when you are with someone who's obsessed, blah, blah, blah. Y'all don't even know what happens behind closed doors or in private. Ever since we broke up, he messages me, will blow up my phone, mind you, not only from his phone number, it's always from different phone numbers too. So I never know where it's going to come from. He'll create new iCloud accounts to iMessage me. It's always a damn new iCloud account. I'm like, every time I see one pop up on my phone, I'm like, here we again. Also, will email me. And he does this when he gets his phone taken away. Also, not only me, but he'll blow up my mom's phone. Is that normal behavior to you? But I'm crazy for making a 5-second TikTok.
This girl, it's giving toxic. I'm not saying Liam isn't also toxic. I'm pretty sure this was just a toxic situation. But when she is using the defense of, I only made a 5-second TikTok about him and you're all calling me crazy because I keep talking about him, while she's writing a fucking book about him the whole time, is mental. This made headlines, right? Oh, you know, she's legally gone after him to try and get a restraining order from him being able to contact her or whatever. She's claiming that he's always trying to contact her. Is it possible that the reason he was trying to contact her was to beg her to not release a book about him. I could understand that to some degree. And here is the news article that came out 2 days before the death of Liam, where she is suing him. It's in all the papers. You know, when someone is low, when someone is clearly where Liam Payne was, this could not have been helped, because all the speculation gets ramped up by the newspapers. And she is basically taking the lawyers onto him to demand that he stops messaging her. I mean, it isn't even really clear what the lawyers are doing. It's just a big article making Liam out to be a really bad guy, but without actually having any real substance to it. All it says is Maya issued a cease and desist to Liam last week following the emergence of new and concerning information. That's it. Like, in the context, as to say this had nothing to do with anything that led up to his death would just be mental. And here was what she had to say on the podcast.
Like, for example, when I announced my book, he did the same thing. He called my mom. I think I'm not going to be around much longer. And
oh my God.
So I was right. He was calling the mother because of how stressed he was about the book. That does add up, actually.
I don't play with death. So I'm like, if you say this, I'm going to try and help you no matter what you've done. And I think he took advantage of my family's kindness. And I was like, if you want to go back to rehab, I'll help you, even though, whatever. And not that I ever wanted to be back with him, but he's still somebody's child. He's somebody's brother. Like, if that were my brother, I would want someone to help him too.
Would you want someone to release a book about them where they detail all of the worst things that they've done in a relationship while they're going through that mental health struggle? That's just, can we ask? No, they didn't ask that, did they? Because this was another classic Yes Woman interview where we just allow for toxic behaviour. If you're going to call out his toxic behaviour, at least take responsibility for your own as well. Was she Mary fucking Poppins in this relationship, was she? Because honestly, in my experience, toxic relationships, they're a two-way street. This is very accusatory from her, and I'm not hearing a lot of responsibility taken from anything I've heard so far.
Like, for example, when I announced my book, he did the same thing. He called my mom. I think I'm not going to be around much longer. But I always just, in the end, I felt like it was a manipulation. And I'm like, especially after everything you've done, I've told you to leave me alone.
Isn't that convenient for her, though, when he is reaching out and saying his mental health is really bad and he feels like he could do something, commit suicide, whatever? Isn't it very convenient for her to go, that's just manipulation, though? Because what does she want to do? She wants to invalidate his feelings and make herself the victim so that then she could commit the act that she wants to commit guilt-free, which is, I want to release my book. I want to pretty much torpedo your career, elevate myself in the process, get myself more attention, more money. If that impacts you, I don't care, because I'm the real victim here. You're not a victim. I'm a victim. And when I'm a victim, I can do whatever I want. And that is the kind of logic that we see consistently in society. Now, I'm not saying I know what happened within this relationship, but the way she's breaking this down is just so one-sided. It's unbelievable. And the fact is now, he is dead. So he was telling the truth to some degree. We know that. And the way she's just unreal, man. Unreal.
He would always just say, I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I can't live with myself. But then is continuing to try and traumatize me. And so I always just felt like it was just like a whole manipulation.
She's not actually quantifying what she means when she says he tries to traumatize me. She's not explaining how or why or any, maybe he wasn't trying to traumatize her. Maybe he was sorry. Maybe he did feel like a total fucking screw up and apologized for the way he'd been behaving. But that doesn't mean you can break the pattern. Sometimes people just inherently aren't capable of being successful in a relationship. And I'm not saying that, excludes him from any blame at all. Clearly, he deserves some blame. Clearly, he made mistakes in that relationship. But the way she's putting this across, wow, this girl has a lot to live with, in my opinion. And I don't mean that this is all her responsibility or whatever, but if you did a podcast like this 2 days before someone committed suicide, talking about them in such a careless way, I know people who've said bad things to people before a suicide. And I've seen the way that impacts people. And often they will never own it. They will never say it loud. They'll hide it within themselves for decades. But it just eats away and it lives on their face, man. This is an ugly situation, this, like. And I'm not going to go through the whole interview because it's a 51-minute interview, but the gist of it is I loved him, but I need to do this for my healing. Let's cut the shit. We know what this is, right? You didn't love him. When you really love someone and you know they're low, even if they've done things to you, it doesn't mean, like, I've had people do loads of bad things to me before. It doesn't mean that I have to hurt them back automatically. That doesn't give you the right to do anything. Two wrongs don't make a right. Funny old thing. I don't know where this came from in society, but apparently for her healing journey, she needed to dish all of this on him. And it's just an excuse for her to further her own career. That's what this is. And I'm sure she's had many other unsuccessful relationships. Did she write a book about them? Did she fuck? I'm disgusted by this sort of shit now. Like, I am fed up with everyone having to fucking dish the dirt on people because they've got nothing else going on in their life other than their fucking Instagram and who's fucked them before. Where's the fucking value from these people? And again, in the relationship, I'm not siding with him. I'm not siding with her. I'm sure it was equally fucking shit and toxic between the two of them. Judging by the way she communicates and takes no responsibility for anything herself, I'm sure it was the pair of them weren't great. But when a relationship's over, then just fucking leave it there, man. It's pathetic when people do this. She's an example of why not to. And I hope people fucking learn. Because she's admitted I had 1,000,001 warnings and I ignored them all. So don't tell me you didn't know or anything like that. You fucking knew fine well. God knows how much she's going to pay a therapist now to tell her, there, it's not your fault really. It'll make it all better now. God knows, because that's what's going to happen. But at least that book will sell well, so she won't have to feel bad for too long, because that was what this was all about, wasn't it? Now the book's going to sell. Brilliant. Job done. And for those who are saying, well, she couldn't have really known. Literally, a girl on Twitter tweeted out the day of that podcast, because of the podcast, Liam Payne, low-key, going to kill himself. It's gone viral. And that isn't a coincidence, by the way. It was verified later when someone asked, how did you know like that was going to happen? And they said, I just assumed he'd be really unwell with the internet bashing him over him being abusive and predatory, which was the allegations that came from her mouth. So let's not act like we didn't know this was coming in any way, shape or form. Like, it was predictable that he was going to take this very fucking badly. And if you knew him well enough to know he was already in a terrible place, wow, fucking hell. And when it comes to these allegations, I'm not saying that she's lying, by the way. I just want to make that clear. I'm saying that it would be a lot more believable if you had a police report instead of a book that you'd written, which isn't even one that's meant to be factual. You've literally wrote a story where you've changed all the names that gives you creative freedom to exaggerate what he's done wrong, reduce what you've done wrong, and do whatever the hell you want in this story. You know, you could change the whole thing. And it just so happens that you're going to make money off this book. And the more sensational it is, the more money you're likely to make. We all know that. So if you want to be taken seriously, then you should go to the police and not made it about money. And this is the scene of the hotel. Now, clearly, it's all been kicking off. We've got things broken in the bathtub there. We've got a lot of, usage of drugs by the looks of it. Broken TV. He allegedly broke his laptop as well. This was not a man who was in a somber mood by the looks of it. Sometimes you hear of people who take their own life and it's just misery. It's low energy. It's, I've given up. I don't want to do this anymore. You think about the damage he did in that room. He was angry. And the way he took his own life, it wasn't something that was peaceful. He threw himself off a fucking building by the looks of it. That was anger. Rage. I'm sick of this. Who knows what happened in the hours before that happened? Because there was Snapchats released that people thought were taking the day off, but they were from previous days that his team had probably released an hour before he died. He was not in a good way at all, obviously. But I'd be fascinated to know, did he speak to someone in those hours leading up to it? Did he have an interaction with anyone? Because it looks like there was something going on that led up to that. And I think when something like this happens, it's so immediate, we kind of can't even process the enormity of it. Like, this is one of the members of one of the biggest boy bands of all time. A guy who had a little son left to live for, who we could add 1,000, 1,000,000 more memories with this boy, and none will be created from this day on. Every time people hear that happy music that he was known for, that sadness is actually tinged into that music now forever. This was a man who died in one of the worst ways a person can die, in my opinion. He didn't want to be here anymore. And as much as he was the one who made this decision in that moment to do what he did, and probably heavily under the influence of a lot of drugs, what was going on in his life leading up to that clearly played a massive role. And you've got to be fucking careful, man. You've got to be careful with people who aren't 100%. You've got to look after them. And I always check on my mates. I always message me mates. And I like to think men need to do better than that, because he clearly felt alone. He'd mentioned that in previous interviews. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people wishing that they could have done something, or they could have helped him, or they didn't realize how bad it was, because when you're famous, you have to put on this persona. So you see when he's shaking hands with fans and taking photographs, just days beforehand, all smiles, he's fine. You would never have known, because that is part of fame. Making people who really want to see you, you're making their day, feel good about that interaction, even if you feel shit inside. And I'll be interested to know what comes out and what was really going on as the story develops. And I really hope we do find out more, because it is so open-ended in regards to what was going on with this girl, what was going on with his life. There's still more to come. But let me know what you think about this situation in the comments below. A very sad day. R.I.P. to Liam Payne, and condolences to his friends, his family and his fans. It's a really sad time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.